What historical fact makes you cry? A story from my great-grandfather who fought in World War I. Soldiers would cease fire to pick up their men's bodies and would have a smoke together, go back to their trenches and start firing again. Neither side of front-line soldiers actually wanted to be there. Just drafted for war. There's a line from the song and the band played Waltzing Matilda that talks about this. And a band played Waltzing Matilda as we stopped to bury our slain and we buried ours and the Turks buried theirs, then it started all over again. This soldier, I realized, must have had friends at home and in his regiment, yet he lay there deserted by all except his dog. I looked on, unmoved, at battles which decided the future of nations. Tearless, I had given orders which brought death to thousands. Yet here I was stirred, profoundly stirred to tears. And by what? By the grief of one dog. Licking his face and howling, on a moonlit field after a battle. Napoleon was haunted by this scene until his own death. Web link. Napoleon had a funny relationship with dogs. He feuded with his wife's pug, had his life saved by a Newfoundland, and wrote an original post-ed about how not liking dogs made you a disloyal person, but also made it illegal to name a dog after him. Then there was this tidbit, and finally the fact that he kept a dog in his exile that he would take long walks with. Once, during a naval engagement, he even surrendered to a dog. The image in my head of Napoleon feuding with a pug just made my whole day. Thank you, beautiful stranger. Damn it, Snickers, those were my favorite socks. Napoleon edit, naming a pug Fortune sounds adorable. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The doors to the exit and the stairwells were locked. So you either had to jump out the window or be burned alive. I'm sure I'm paraphrasing, but regulations are written in blood. That's what my dad says about his job at the railroad. The rule book is written in blood, dangerous crap. Sadly, it takes a tragedy to enact change. The Triangle Shirtwaist fire is why all buildings must have outward opening doors that cannot be locked. Edit, doors cannot be locked from the inside, there must be a source of egress for those in the building. The rape of Nanking in 1937. Looking up photos of what the Japanese did there left me silent for a while. They raped and murdered women, bayoneted babies. You can look up a photo of it, used the wounded as rifle and bayonet practice, forced mothers on their sons and fathers on their daughters, and made a contest out of beheading civilians. There is a Japanese newspaper article you can look up about it. It's disgusting, and the worst part about it is that the Japanese government denies most of these acts, along with a lot of other war crimes that they committed afterwards. It always shakes me to my core to know that human beings are capable of doing such horrible things to one another. And smile while doing it. I can't remember his name, but this actually caused a high-ranking Nazi official stationed over there to safeguard well over 500 Chinese refugees in his multiple properties just due to how horrific it was. When he reported it to the Nazis, attempted to seek aid, and he started to publicly condemn the Japanese, he was forced to step down from the Nazi party, causing him and his family to be subjected to extreme poverty, barely surviving on scraps. After the war, when the people of Nanking heard about his plight, they collectively raised funds and resources to help him get back on his feet, and when he died of old age they raised a memorial there in his honor. Absolutely wild story. It's on the Wikipedia article somewhere in way more detail. It's if you or anyone else wants to look at the Wikipedia web link. Out of all the historical events I've learned about in detail, this one stands out as the one I was most disturbed by. The sheer hatred, evil and widespread twisted atrocities are sickening. Not to point fingers, but the Japanese during that period were ruthless, especially to the Chinese. The fact that it was a widespread example of a group effort with the specific intent to harm other people is so disturbing. A failure on so many levels. Edit. There's a bunch of other events that are also truly evil with similar outcomes, but for some reason this one always sticks out. Probably sticks out because of how long, gruesome, and unnecessary it was. They held the city for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of complete, unspeakable, inexcusable war crimes. With no resolution at all. Prince Osaka did not get any punishment, and neither did his fellow officers. Some Japanese still don't believe it happened, or believe it was exaggerated. No formal apology for 80 years, even though it's the same ruling family. Not many people are even aware it happened. That's what makes it stick out. At least with other massacres, the attackers at least acknowledge it happened. It's a shame that the Japanese Nationalist Party denies this ever happened. After the Pearl Harbor attack, at least some men were alive in a pocket of air inside one of the capsized ships. Navy personnel could hear them banging on the hull and trying to signal for help, but there was no way to get at them safely. The water was full of fuel and oil, so blowtorches weren't a workable idea. And there was no way for divers to get into the ship because the damage had rendered the whole thing a death trap of twisted steel. There wasn't even any way to communicate with the trapped men. So the guards at Pearl Harbor had to listen to those calls for help getting weaker and weaker, while inside everyone slowly suffocated. When they hauled the ship up for scrap later, there were 16 notches scratched onto the wall of that compartment, which means at least one casualty of Pearl Harbor lived until December 23, 1941. God damn. 16 days. At that point, in pure darkness and fear, how does one even count days? Perhaps delirium set in and they thought it was a new day, but really they just went unconscious for a couple of hours. Sacagawea, who accompanied Lewis and Clark on their expedition to explore the lands we now know as the Western United States, had a vital coincidence on the journey that always makes me emotional to think about. She was born a Shoshone but was taken around the age of 12 and made a slave to the Hidatsa. After being with them for 3 or so years, she was sold to a French man named Toussaint Charbonneau, who took her as a wife. When Lewis and Clark met her, she was about 16 years old and pregnant with Charbonneau's child. The birth was a tough one and Lewis helped with the child's safe delivery before Sacagawea and Charbonneau joined them on the expedition. Lewis and Clark knew they would meet the Shoshone on their journey and were hoping Sacagawea could help them procure some supplies, especially horses, to help them cross the Rocky Mountains. Sacagawea didn't speak English. She spoke Shoshone and Hidatsa. Charbonneau spoke Hidatsa and French, and one of the members of Lewis and Clark's expedition spoke French and English. Suffice to say, translation was complicated and complex. When the expedition finally came upon the Shoshone's territory, they agreed to meet and hear Lewis and Clark's proposal. They sat down around the fire and began negotiations. The chief of the tribe began to speak with Sacagawea and the conversation proceeded rapidly. The others, unable to really understand what was going on, were confused when she and the chief began to cry, and then to embrace. In the years since her capture, it turned out, Sacagawea's brother had become chief. He had believed her dead and she did not recognize him at first. The celebration, when the tribe learned who she was, and the appreciation bestowed upon Lewis and Clark for returning her, is hard to completely express. From Wikipedia, Lewis recorded their reunion in his journal, shortly after Captain Clark arrived with the interpreter Charbonneau, and the Indian woman, who proved to be a sister of the chief Kamiawait. The meeting of those people was really affecting, particularly between Sacagawea and an Indian woman, who had been taken prisoner at the same time with her, and who had afterwards escaped from the militaries and rejoined her nation. Whenever I start to think about what she went through, from her capture and slavery among the Hidatsas, to her being taken as a wife by Charbonneau, traveling across largely unknown lands with people whose language she didn't speak, to finally being reunited with her family, it always makes me emotional. She went through so much. There's a story in Stephen Ambrose's book Undaunted Courage about how the Lewis and Clark expedition got into a tough situation and had to decide what to do next. I can't remember the details. I think it had to do with a route to take on the way back, or perhaps whether to stay the winter on the Pacific coast or turn back immediately. But Lewis and Clark decided to put it to a vote, and Sacagawea and York, Clark's slave, had their votes included in the total along with everyone else's. For some reason, I find this fact very affecting. Sacagawea and York were both slaves, and were definitely second class in the society of the time, but when they were out in the wilderness, at least in this instance, their votes were equal. It was an army expedition, so it's very possible that she was the first woman, and York was the first black man, to have their votes recognized by an official of the U.S. government. Teddy Roosevelt's mother Mittie and his wife Alice, who had just given birth days before, both died in the same house on the same day, hours apart from each other. In his diary entry that day, he drew a large black X and scribbled, "The light has gone out of my life." That's some heavy crap right there, man. He lost his son Quentin too in World War I. When his aircraft was shot down by German soldiers, they discovered that he was Roosevelt's son and buried him with full military honors and funeral as they respected the president's son for wanting to fight. I believe I heard something about Quentin being the only offspring of a president to have died in combat or something along those lines. His other son, Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., died of a heart attack in Normandy. He landed with the first wave of troops, but he wasn't engaged in combat the night he had his heart attack. If I recall, the two brothers are currently buried next to each other at a U.S. cemetery in Normandy. It especially hurts if you understand Roosevelt's ideology of exuberance. He would enter rooms as if at a run. He joked in the face of assassination attempts. He believed in being alive with a capital A. But that day, the light has gone out of my life. I can't remember the exact quote, but his surviving daughter said he wanted to be the bride at every wedding, the corpse at every funeral, and the baby at every christening. I also forget the exact quote, but one of his fellow politicians said that death had to take him while he was asleep, because if he was awake, there would have been a fight. The cartoon with the Grim Reaper approaching an obvious, from the viewer's angle, dummy in a bed while the real Teddy waits in the shadows was pretty damn funny. That'd be his first daughter, Alice, who was a known troublemaker. He famously said, "I can either be the father of Alice or run the country. I cannot possibly do both." I learned about this in a Dan Carlin podcast. During the German-Soviet War, there was a Red Army soldier who sang each night with a hauntingly beautiful voice. His comrades would give him their tea rations and scarves to protect his larynx. One night, he couldn't sing because he had gotten sick. A German soldier crawled across no man's land and tossed something into the Soviet trench. The Soviet soldiers thought it was a grenade. However, it was a package containing a letter asking if the singer was okay and if he needed medicine. A truly heartwarming moment in an otherwise horrific front. Edit. Thanks for the awards and upvotes. Seriously, though, if you are even remotely interested in history, you can't go wrong with hardcore history. I never knew that I wanted to listen to a man talk about a topic for 16 hours. The Christmas truce of 1914 is also amazing. Soldiers created an unofficial truce for Christmas and celebrated the eve and the day together. I have also heard that the soldiers refused to fight each other for weeks after because they actually saw the humanity in each other. It was after threat of tyranny and execution that they began to fight. Edit. The soldiers on both fronts were switched with soldiers from different fronts to keep the fight going. Thanks for the award. The worst nightmare for the powers that should not be. I'm glad to come across the occasional wholesome story in amongst all of these depressing tales. Most if not all the astronauts aboard the Challenger survived the explosion. It was the crash into the water that would have killed them. I was going to mention this too, except in the context that it never should have happened. The night before the launch, NASA talked with Morton Thiokol engineers. They made the solid rocket boosters. The engineers were very concerned about the weather conditions. The lowest temperature the shuttle had ever launched in was 54 degrees Fahrenheit. The conversation turned around to, "Can you prove there will be problems if we launch?" And engineers had to say no, there was no proof there definitely would be problems. So they proceeded with the launch. The melted o-ring made a temporary seal, which held for about 40 to 50 seconds. If there hadn't been a strong wind shear aloft that broke the seal loose, there's a chance they might have made it to space. The worst part is that the solid rocket boosters had a history of o-ring blow-by. This was not the first time o-rings did not seal correctly. It was the first time it completely failed. NASA knew of the problem, but they didn't prioritize trying to fix it. NASA put politics and money in front of human safety. It was the first time 13-year-old me saw it. I believed what I'd read, that NASA always put human safety first. It utterly shattered my view of them. When Columbia broke up on re-entry, I wasn't surprised. Edit. Wow. I woke up to a lot to respond to here. I want to respond to most of this, but I've got a busy day ahead. I'll try to get responses out throughout the day. You'd like the book Truth, Lies and O-Rings? I probably would, although it caused me a lot of pain in my teenage years. I thought NASA could do no wrong. The shuttle program was the major program I saw as a child. I did a lot of reading, a lot of research, and multiple papers in high school to try to salve the pain and anger I felt. To this day, I still have the major dialogue memorized. I should probably let it go, And I kind of have, but it's like the Kennedy assassination to me. I remember where I was at the time and how I learned about it. I'll look it up, thank you. When I saw the recent Netflix documentary about the Challenger, I was surprised that to the day some of the NASA managers believe that they took the right decision and that the important goal was to launch, not safety. I bet it's easier to think that, than to feel the responsibility. This makes me so upset, because it was so preventable but they met likely a painful death, through impact. And the teacher, and her students watching. Just miserable. When Alexander Hamilton's eldest son died, his second child Angelica Hamilton had a mental breakdown and she never recovered. Sometimes, her family would walk into a room with only her in it, and she would be speaking to her dead brother. I used to be a care worker for elderly people and we had a lady in our facility who used to have a twin sister. The lady had a husband and they wanted children but she was infertile, whereas her sister could have kids but she never married. Her sister and husband were dead, with no kids, she was just alone, and she knew, but eventually dementia took this from her, and she would ask about her sister and husband all the time. One day I went in to give her medication and as I was in the kitchen I overheard her speaking to her husband and sister saying, "I know you're dead, but that's okay because you're here." She was lucid that evening, told me she knew she was hallucinating, but she kept talking to them anyway. Broke my heart. I miss her. Oof. That's heavy. She realized she's all alone in this world and tried to cling to the people closest to her. She was a very happy person 99% of the time. It was actually quite fortunate because a lot of people with dementia or other degenerative disorders end up scared or aggressive. She was just happy and chatty and friendly. She loved to hug everyone. And only a few years later, Alexander Hamilton died the same way. I can only imagine how much war that made her mental situation. Same way, same guns, same spot. I'm the same age as Philip was when he died and I genuinely can't imagine dueling someone like that. I honestly wonder if Hamilton was suicidal. From what little I know, the duel could have been avoided 100 times over or ended without bloodshed. How similar it was to his son's death makes me think it could have been intentional. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.